How far would you go for the love of your life?
For Carl Tanzler, this is a very complex question to answer.
Carl is a German born on February 8th, 1827 in the city. Since he was little, he said he had some strange dreams. He always dreamed about the Countess Anna Constantina von Birkdorf, an ancestor of his family who died more than 100 years before he was born. And she was a lover of the King of Poland for a time, before being exiled to another country. This is something very curious, because after all, how did he manage to dream so perfectly about someone he had never seen? She showed him the face of a dark-haired woman, and said she was the love of her life. This type of dream is something that most people would easily ignore. But for Carl, it was not quite like that. And ever since that vision, he never forgot the woman's face. And he spent several years searching for her. His real name was George Carl Tanzler. He changed it in honor of his ancestor to Carl von Cosel. Carl was involved in the construction of a kind of rudimentary airplane when the First World War happened. He and his companions were placed in camps in Australia, supposedly for. He was transferred to the prison trial in New South Wales, where he remained for the rest of the war. Before being released, he was trying to build a small sea vessel in order to try to escape. After the war, Tanzler was released, but he was not allowed to return to Germany. So he went to Holland, where he found his mother and lived with her for 3 years. During this period, he met his wife Doris, with whom he had 2 daughters named Aisha and Clarice. Clarissa died at just 10 years old from diphtheria. Is a communicable disease caused by bacteria. Despite having married and had 2 daughters, he went to Cuba and then to Florida, where he began his life and practiced his professions. His family later followed him for reasons that we do not know to this day. And so, Carl left his family where they disembarked and moved alone to Key West, where he began working in radiology at a hospital. And this is where everything starts to get very difficult, very bizarre. Carl met a young woman named Maria Helena, an American of Cuban descent who was only 22 years old. And even though Carl was more than twice the girl's age, he became totally obsessed with her. And according to him, she was the woman his ancestor had shown her in her dreams. The problem was that Helena had tuberculosis. Although tuberculosis is still a very serious disease today. At the time Carl met Helena, it was practically incurable, and few people recovered. She had not had an easy life, and had already separated from her husband because of an abortion she had. Her family background was quite poor, and neither she nor her parents had much money, and there was no way they could afford her treatment. And so Carl offered to take on not only the costs of her hospital care, but also to provide the care himself. And although he is undoubtedly a totally talented and intelligent man, he was not a doctor, but Helena and her family accepted him anyway. And so began Carl's attempts to save his wife. Treatments ranged from the conventional, like ointments, to bizarre and painful things. Painful, and his obsession grew more and more as he tried to save her. He even gave her some potions to drink and even wine. Listen, at this moment I need to emphasize something very important. All the time he covered not only with medical care, but also without presence of money and extreme displays of affection. Because he believed a lot in destiny, and in his supposed dream with the love of his life. He always insisted on having a romance with her, however. At every moment she denied him, and I never wanted anything more than treatment. So it wasn't a reciprocated love. She began to get worse, and the disease ravaged her body. He brought some medical equipment to her house, put electrodes on her, and tried to get her. This was a painful treatment that had no information that he could cure tuberculosis. He was really desperate, trying anything. If I could. He even used an X-ray machine that he believed would load the oxygen atoms and save your life. None of the treatments worked. Battled with the disease and died in 1931. Carl was extremely saddened by this and offered to pay for the funeral arrangements. and the family again agreed, so that Helena could be buried in a mausoleum, a large and extremely expensive project, a true palace for his memory and eternal rest, in which only he had the key. Everyone who lived in the nearby community
Knew that Kroll visited the grave daily.
he would sit outside and talk quietly to her,
As if she was still there. He would often buy her some gifts.
and he even installed a telephone inside the grave, supposedly so he could call Ellie while he was away.
And so it went on for about 2 years.
And slowly the locals began to notice changes in Carl's behavior. He was seen buying perfumes and ointments, even though his wife had been gone a long time. He was buying some women's clothes,
And some children even swear they saw him slow dancing in his living room
with some kind of life-size mannequin. Carl said that Helena agreed to marry him. However, she had already passed away long ago. Then people began to suspect his stories a little, and these rumors quickly reached Helena's sister. She found it all very strange and decided to visit the man who had fallen in love with her sister before she passed away. And when she knocked on his door, he calmly let her in without hesitation. He took her to the room and showed Helena lying on the bed.
She was fully dressed and covered in jewelry.
When she first looked at it, she had believed that he had built the life-size mannequin of Helena. However, the truth was much more disturbing. The police were called, and when they examined the mannequin, they discovered that it was actually Helena's mummified body. Carl said that Helena
Had come to him in a vision asking him to rescue her body.
So, he granted her request. When he brought her to home, he placed it in a makeshift laboratory, and even started building planes so I could fly with her. He believed that eventually he would use this plane to be able to fly so high in the atmosphere that radiation from space would penetrate the tissues of her body and bring her back to life, and for 7 years straight, he lived with her body. In your home, Carl did a huge amount of work to be able to neutralize the effects of decomposition, natural to the body. He's used waxes and plaster to be able to preserve her facial features. Their eyes were removed and replaced with lives. The body lasted. It was filled with wires, hangers, and cloths to maintain the shape of his body, and to avoid the bad smell, he filled it with perfume. Over time, the hair began to fall out and was replaced by a wig. It contained some of her real hair that her mother had provided to Carl. After she passed away, his bones were lined with wire to keep structure of your skeleton. Every night he slept with her playing his songs, favorites, dancing and singing. Something some are probably wondering: if he had any kind of sexual relationship with her. Youth indicates that it is not, as there is nothing in the autopsy or reports to prove this. They ended up finding something quite unusual. A tube was inserted into her vagina. He may have done this just to preserve the body and leave it the way it was, but it's pretty hard to think of any other purpose for that. So in my opinion, yes, he also committed necrophilia. After the police examined Helena's body, the authorities opened it for viewing by Theoing. The case became a sensation at the time, and newspapers reported that almost 7,000 people went to see the woman's corpse. And what shocks me the most is that the public began to sympathize with the case. The way he took care of the corpse led people to see him as a romantic figure, especially among women, which is something totally bizarre. After that, she was buried in a new grave,
Without identification to prevent further violations.
Carl was finally arrested and tried for destruction of a grave and removal of corpses
Without authorization.
And it is worth mentioning that in all the examinations they did on him, did not show that he had any kind of mental problem. So he did all of this without being mentally insane, which makes it all even weirder. The court acquitted him after considering that the crimes had already prescribed. At the time, the deadline for this type of trial was up to 2 years after the event. And this guy was so insane that he even asked the police for her body back. Obviously, he was denied. After the case, Carl returned to life, near where he had left his wife and family before the incident. He even wrote a biography of his case and gained citizenship in the United States. Carl died in 1952 at the age of 75.
In the case where he was found dead, they found a doll,
identical to Helena, which he probably built to remember her. However, some go further and believe that he managed to recover her body. But this is just speculation and no one knows for sure. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, subscribe to the channel because it helps a lot in my work. And to receive more cases like this and several other contents, activate the bell of notifications. I will leave here some other video that you might be interested in. Thank you very much for the 700 subscribers, and this is just the beginning. Until next time, and I will see you soon.